say hello. Good evening. Come on. Good evening. I'm very glad that Sis Bierix and Cheryl Mosley invited me to come here. I'm glad that Bérénice came from Los Angeles to make something. And we will speak, and then you will ask questions if you wish. She says more than me now. Bérénice, it's yours.
Agnès, it's a great pleasure indeed. And we have just spent the day together, preparing, plotting, laughing.
Eating?
Eating, yeah.
Yes.
Twice.
Twice.
Together. We have prepared a little, what we call a chemin de fer, a little like plan for this evening. I accepted with gratitude and enthusiasm to be a respondent for Agnès Varda because she's somebody without whom contemporary cinema will not be what it is now, and certainly who has paved the way for many of what we consider auteur cinema, art cinema, personal cinema, new cinema. And very early on, she was quite aware of what she represented as a filmmaker, even when she didn't quite know how to make a film without the help of people. She wasn't trained as a filmmaker, but very early with her first film, she said, this is a film to be read. Why a film to be read? Because it's a film that is written. And when I say written, I don't mean that the screenplay is well written. Varda coined a word which in French sounds a little better than in English, and it's cinécriture. Cinécriture can be translated accurately, but not perfectly, as cine writing. That means that the composition of a film itself, the way the shots are organized, the editing, the composition of a space, the directing of the actors, the tempo of the music, the pacing, all of this has to be designed with the same care, the same intelligence, but also the same freedom that a writer, a poet, and I would even say a surrealistic poet, would put words on a piece of paper. Most of mainstream cinema is very unimaginative. The fantastic aspect of Varda's film is that she really takes seriously the concept of écriture, the concept of filmic composition. In France, of course, it had a polemical value because before the New Wave, and Varda was among the forerunners of the New Wave. Before the New Wave in France, when we say un film est bien écrit, a movie is well written, they were talking about the screenplay, even more so than they did in Hollywood. So talking about cinécriture, cine writing had a polemical value, asserting the specificity of the filmic medium against the written page, but also as a springboard for imagination. We were going to show you a number of clips, so I will not talk too long now, and I know that Agnès will go back on the very notion of cinécriture, writing, composition, but there is one thing that I want to insist on, is the incredible freedom that she's always followed in composing her film, because she's treated every element of a filmic discourse the way, again, a writer would treat words, and not any kind of writer. One of the inspirations of Agnès' work is definitely the surrealist tradition in France. That was the fact oftentimes of Spanish men such as Buñuel and Dali, but also Éluard and Zara and so forth and so on. People who really pushed further the boundaries of what you can do with the written word. Well, she did something like that by pushing the boundaries of a filmic expression. I'm going to give you one example, and this example is going to be visual. It's a sequence, a very short sequence, a little excerpt from Agnès' most recent film, The Gleaners and I. Now, when you look at The Gleaners and I, you can only say one thing. I've never seen a film like that. And then you think twice, if you're lucky, yes, I've seen films like that. I've seen other films by Agnès Varda. They display, in different ways, a similar amount of freedom. The Gleaners and I could be called a documentary. But again, it could be called many other things. A personal essay, a polemical statement, a road movie, a wandering movie. It's a movie that jumps from images of a filmmaker, self-portrait, very self-conscious self-portrait. She even quotes Rembrandt. Why not? And then moves in a very elliptical, very flexible, very imaginative ways through various parts of France and French society and concerns, and look from the point of view of a classical French painting about gleaners, women who would go into the fields after the harvest was done to pick up pieces of wheat that had been discarded, to the way our society is dealing with waste. Those who produce waste, those who pollute the earth with waste, those who live from waste, those who recycle waste, who reclaim it, those who have a polemical stance on waste, and so forth and so on. In the excerpt that I'm going to show you, you'll see how she flows effortlessly from one idea to the next, from one shot to the next. And we call this excerpt that we both like very much, the man with the rubber boots. She calls him François, she knows him, I never met him. For me, he's the man with the rubber boots. But this man with the rubber boots doesn't come out of nowhere. He comes out of, again, an examination on the role of waste in our modern societies. And he's somebody also who has a point of view. He's not only an object of a camera, he's a subject of his own discourse. And what is he talking about? He's talking about recycling garbage, but he's also talking about the polluters. And a few years ago in France, we had a major ecological disaster. An oil tanker leaked and destroyed beautiful beaches in France, and it was called the Erika. And so there are allusions to the Erika disaster. And so now I'm going to stop talking and let the images speak for themselves. S'il vous plaît, please, the clip, ma'am.
Well, the whole film will show soon, because excerpts, makes me nervous. But François, that man, I call him François because it's his name. Yeah. And, they ask me very often how we did meet, how I could meet these people. Because the problem is not so much to film them and to let them express. You have to find them. I don't live with, especially all my life, with people eating in the garbage cans. So I had to find them. And through people asking questions, going to one person to another, I traveled all the way through France. And I heard about this man through somebody who had a house near Aix-en-Provence. And they told me there is a man there. And it took us a week to find him because we didn't know his name. And he has a work, he says, but he has a night work. He cleans the dishes in a pizzeria, but he doesn't go every day. So we finally met the guy. And by phone, we made an appointment. And I thought, we'll see, if he comes and wants to know more about the film. And it happened exactly like it is here. I was ready with the camera. He came, we say hello, have a coffee. That was it. And we spoke with him all afternoon. And we got him. Other times with other people, and I will speak of that another day, but it took us weeks just to approach the people, to convince them or to speak with them. So documentary is an adventure, you know, and he must say it was a very nice answer to that adventure because he was so speedy, you know, in a way, so ready to speak and so bright. And well, later he speaks very well. Now, from here to where? From here, yes. The thing is about the freedom that Bérénice spoke about. And it's true that from one film to another, I don't use the same shape because here it's a raw documentary. I had to keep open to what could happen. And in some other films, I give myself more, I give myself like a challenge to meet or to beat, both, right? Meet and beat. And because time is a subject that really fascinates me. It shows a little in that film, if you see it, but there was a film in which I thought time would be very important. I wanted to tell a story in a real time. It's called Cleo from 5 to 7. Actually, it's from 5 to 6:30. But I was interested in, well, you know, I don't like long film. I think people get bored after a while, so I thought 6:30 was enough. But the challenge was that it had to fit the real time. So like when clocks were in the streets, you know, and I had to do the sequence and shoot, I had to be sure that the clock on the street would be the exact time when we do the editing, which goes from 5 to 5:10, 5:15, 5:20. So it was quite difficult. It seems odd to speak only about that, but in filming you have to fight with reality, the reality of the shooting, which doesn't fit the reality of the finished film. By the way, you know, I met Andy Warhol because I wanted Viva for a film later that I did Lion's Love. And Andy, you know, with that voice and the noise he had, he said to Viva, Viva, you have to do that film. She's a great filmmaker. She made a film, Cleo from 5 to 7. It's wonderful. He said, well, you know, if I had made the film, I had really shot it between 5 and 6:30, 5 and 7. Well, you know, Andy Warhol was famous for filming fast, and he would have done it in 2 hours. It took me 2 months, the shooting plus the editing. But I kept the idea that I like to keep not only the time passing, minute after minute, as a clock, you know, that you can discuss with the clock. The clock goes on like this. And what we feel inside that time is sometimes very subjective. We feel it's long, it's short. I wanted to work on that, analyze that in a story that you may speak about, Mademoiselle Bérénice.
Pleasure, because again, I'll be personal, but Cleo is a film that, for a great number of people of my generation, of the generation of my students now, is a landmark. It's a movie that was made in 1961. And upon looking at it again, it hasn't lost any of its challenging aspects, except that now, because it was a forerunner, we're better used to what it was saying then. I want to add something. 5 à 7 in French, it's a little naughty. It's when you have clandestine amours between the moment you leave the office and the moment you get home, it's between 5 and 7.
The Love in the Afternoon, famous
one. It's Love in the Afternoon. So, but of course, you know, the movie is only 90 minutes, so it does stop at 6:30. But I wanted to make that statement because things have to be said, right?
Well,
this was
the fact that you made it sort of funny because 5 to 7, when it's a kind of dramatic story in a way.
This was the first time that there was a movie that was made solely from the point of view of female subjectivity. And I want to add, and Cleo Florence, it's also her name, has this duality. She can be very nice, very tender, very sympathetic. She can also be a spoiled bitch, let's say it. She was not one of these positive heroines that a certain feminist cinema of the 70s or 80s wanted to promote. This was also, and we actually, Agnès and I, we talked about that, and as I was saying, that it was a film that was a forerunner of movies like Jeanne Dielman, made in 1975 by Chantal Ackerman, in which you also see a woman performing daily life actions in real time. And Agnès said, yes, but there was High Noon by Fred Zimmerman before. And yes, but High Noon is a dramatic film because the action shown involved killing and shooting and guns and so forth. The drama in Cleo is twofold. This is a young woman who is expecting the results of a medical test to know whether or not she has cancer. At the same time, this expectation, which of course you could say it's like the expectation in High Noon, this expectation operates some internal transformation in her. And the real subject of the film is to see how her persona changes, how her self-awareness, how the image she has of herself changes, how she comes to admit that she is lonely, but in a way that would open her up to another, as she may never have done before. Actually, when she met somebody, she said, in another day I would never have spoken to you. I don't want to spoil the film for those of you who have not seen it. But again, to make a film solely from the point of view of female subjectivity, and also to show this character as a woman, as a wanderer, which is going to become the subject of many, many films, including a film we'll talk about later by Agnès herself. Femininity as this permanent displacement, femininity as wandering. And for that, Agnès found a marvelous counterweight, which is her love for Paris, her desire to explore in a very minute way various neighborhoods of Paris. So we see Cleo going from one point to the next, again in real time. Each of the steps she takes are the steps that you need to take to go from point A to point B. Then you also have the people of Paris, I would say the little people of Paris. And actually, without deflowering the excerpt you're going to see, at some point, and this is an experience that of course is of paramount importance for female subjectivity, 3 men are looking at Cleo as she's passing by. You know, a woman passes and men are looking, and this is something we used to. Well, these men were there. They were real people in the street of Paris, and they're looking at this beautiful actress playing Cleo, who is passing by, looking somehow distressed. I think that maybe it's time now to show the excerpt. Clip, please. A little comment, there was no subtitles. This store, à bonne santé, that means to your good health. So that's pretty ironical.
I was impressed that when you look at streets, the way they are, but you have a specific subject, the answer is there. I didn't put that shop there, good health, you know. It was on a real way, because not only it's real time, and this is the difference with High Noon or even Jeanne Dillman, it's real geography. Real, if there are 5 steps, she does 5 steps. You know, in most of the films, there is a vocabulary, a grammar. You say grammar?
Grammar.
Grammar. That we accept that if somebody takes a luggage and goes to the train station, you cut and he's in another city. Or we accept things, you know, we accept that. I say, bye, I see you later, and then I see you later. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I try to just go against, and I did all the steps, all the distance in her room. And, you know, when she goes out, she goes the steps, she crosses the little patio, there is a kid, she goes in the street. I mean, the trajectoire, comment on peut dire?
Trajectory.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. She takes a taxi, and the taxi does the real driving to drive her to her house. So these challenges were difficult, but you see, in a way, it doesn't matter, because what I wanted to do really was to show that fear, show with that character that fear can wake you up. That woman is, and the piece that we chose together to show, and I like it very much because it's the exact middle of the film. It's 45 minutes. And in the first part, she has been a spoiled kid, this is true, a beautiful woman, and everybody looks at her. She's looked at by the men in the street, by her lover who visits her, by her maid at Angers with the stripes. By the way, the composer is Michel Legrand himself, playing. He did the songs, he did the music, but he plays the musician here. And whatever happens in the first 45 minutes, I mean, she's described by her mirrors and by people looking at her. And at that point, when she gets rid of her déshabillé, how say that?
When she changes dress.
But,
she puts herself in her negligee first.
Negligee. Yeah. When she gets rid of her negligee and gets rid of her wig and puts that little simple dress and goes in the street, from that minute, she will be the one looking at people. And in my mind, you know, we're always speaking about feminism, but that was a feminist thing, because I think that women become aware of the world if they start to look at things, and if they don't accept to be only looked at or described or defined by the look of their father, their man, their lover, their brothers, the judge, and whatever. And by deciding that they have, you know, a pair of eyes and they can look and they can understand life. And in this film, exactly at that moment you saw, she goes out, she starts to look at people. She meets people in the street, making money by doing strange things. She meets a model, she meets a friend, and she meets a soldier who was afraid to be in the Algerian War, which was, by the way, as stupid as the Vietnam War. You know, a lot of young men, they didn't know where they were there, afraid to die and for no cause. And they meet in the garden, and there is a real encounter. And my point was really, and I think it is in the film, that fear sometimes wake you up, and for that woman, woke her up. And she was able to share something, including share fear. It's better than being alone and be afraid. And you know, many films I've made, especially Cleo, are not inspired, but at least accompany, you say that. It goes with a painting, which I have in my mind. And there is a German painting of Baldung Green, 16th century, something like 1617. And he was always painting beautiful, fleshy, blonde, tall women. And near them, near the woman, is a skeleton. And one speaks to her ear. In another piece, one is pulling her hair, or unlacing?
Embracing her.
Embracing. There is always a beautiful woman and a skeleton. I thought that was the story. Like, what is a beautiful woman when death is maybe about to get her? And that image was in my mind all the time. But even in very simple shots, you know, you have to have a strong image helping you to keep where you go. And when I say where you go, where she goes, she's walking in streets in Paris that I love, this is true, and meeting the soldier in a garden and taking a bus and going to the hospital, walking to the point where she has to meet the doctor and what says the doctor. And this is true, I've been describing women characters. And there is another one to whom I dedicated a lot of energy because I loved the character. I had been inspired by the real people. But a woman vagabond, that's called Vagabond here, that in France the film is called Saint-Ouen-Illois, which is roofless and lawless, I would say. Mm-hmm. And this is a woman walking also. And she's a rebel. She says no to everything. She doesn't want to work, she doesn't want to be in society, she doesn't want even to be friendly with other people on the road. And by refusing to speak, refusing to share anything, she goes to lonely, the more and more she's lonely. And then because it's the cold winter in France, in the south of France, and little by little she's hungry, she's losing energy, she's so cold. And in that scene that we're about to see, maybe you were supposed to speak about?
I can still speak about it, don't worry.
After?
No, before.
Before. So you say something about Mademoiselle Sandrine Bonnet in Mona, the Vagabond.
Again, I will be personal. Between Cleo, 1961, and Vagabond, 1985, was 24 years. And Vagabond in the United States was lucky to arrive at a time when there were the theoretical tools, the critical tools, to really write beautifully about it. And there's a number of powerful texts written by female theoreticians such as Sandy Fitterman Lewis, Susan Hayward in the UK, more recently Alison Smith, have been able to really understand why Vagabond is a film that is so important. Again, it is a film that takes over the theme of femininity as wandering, with an additional dimension, as Agnès said. This is a woman who says no. Maybe this is something that Cleo is just starting to learn. The moment she takes off her wig, the moment she leaves, she starts saying no. But by having said no, she's also going to start to say yes to others. Maybe this is a more optimistic movie in a way, because the heroine, the protagonist of Vagabond, has learned to say no, but this is increasingly locking her in an impossible situation. Some people have read this situation, and I think this is a fairly accurate statement, as a symbolization of the impossible space of femininity within a certain masculine discourse. And the ending that you're going to see, she's confronted with a very masculine ritual that is indirectly going to cause her death. The film is told through a series of flashbacks. There's no mystery in the film as to the outcome. The film starts with a dead body, the dead body of a frozen vagrant who was frozen to death in a ditch in the winter in the south of France. And this discovery is actually the parallel of the beginning of Citizen Kane by Orson Welles. You have a man dying. Here we have a woman who is dead. And the question is not so much why they die from, but what was their lives, and their lives being refracted through the testimonies of people who have encountered them. So you have these flashback structures, you have a series of witnesses, but in between you have something that you certainly don't have in Citizen Kane. You have this shot of a woman whose physical appearance is more and more disgruntled, more and more, she's dirtier and dirtier, her clothes are falling apart, her boots, as you'll see in this excerpt, are completely falling apart, and she's walking alone, increasingly more so, in the south of France. Now, there's been a few landmark movies that have shown, I'm thinking of Wanda by Barbara Loden, made in 1970. I'm thinking, of a few, actually some films by Chantal Ackerman, like Je tue Hillel, made in 1972, showing that the way for a woman to anchor her subjectivity in a world that is basically phallocentric, it's extraordinarily difficult. So it involves a certain amount of wandering and a certain amount of refusal. And in this double process of wandering and refusal, some of us can get lost. And the tragic ending of Mona, played beautifully, and you were going to say something about that, by Sandrine Bonner, is a testimony to how far one can go in the refusal. Vagabond is a movie that I show quite often to younger generations, my students, and I always get extraordinarily positive reactions from very young women. And one of the things that strikes them is that what Mona does is to refuse the mask that the codes of femininity have constructed for us. This is something that Cleo does when she takes off her wig, but Mona goes further. She doesn't take care of herself, she stinks, she's unkempt. She refuses to be attractive, which strangely enough still keeps her as a desirable object for some men, which was one of the somehow mystery for the film. And I read in some interviews you gave that you had actually friendly argument with Sandrine. Sandrine thought, I don't think any man is going to come after that woman because she stinks too much. And you still wanted her.
Well, I've been investigating a lot. You know, you don't make a film without knowledge because you can write a story, you can imagine things. But I've been, spending a lot of time in the stations at night when after the last train, the station remains open when it's cold. And so vagabonds and people like this go into the station and stay there to be out of the cold for the night. And I went into shelters and I picked people on the road and had been for 3 or 4 months investigating. And I discovered, like always, when we don't know, we don't imagine. But these people are totally different. It's not the gap generation, it's the smell generation. It's the smell gap. They are so dirty, some of them, but there's nothing really laughable, but they are so dirty. They smell so strongly because they don't wash. Their clothes is so disgusting that you have to go that gap. If you don't cross that gap, you cannot even sit near them and speak with them. So I spent a lot of time and fighting against my own use to be sort of clean and finding that I should not be stopped by the smell. And when I could go over that, I learned a lot from them, including, and I was impressed, that some people are totally dirty and not even young. They have love affairs. They have things happening to them. It's not like they are out of the world. And some girls told me, and I was impressed by that they have to accept that they may be raped. We all fight against rape. We know we have these sections of, helping women who have been raped, etc. But on the road like this, life is so tough that it's part of the risk they have. And what they said is, when they're raped, the only way of minimizing the thing is just to think it's not important. I was so impressed by that. And so in the film, you said that Sandrine said she didn't want a scene like this. I made it very discreetly, but it happens all the time. She was sleeping, the character is in the woods, and a man comes and, looks at her, sneaks, and rapes her. And I escaped the scene. And we know life is difficult, but I'm impressed that you really put in so much in a feminist approach, which certainly is true. But I've seen many men discussing that film, discovering...
This is not mutually exclusive, but I think this film
You make it too much exclusive.
This film has a history in the United States.
Yes.
But what I suggest now is, why not we look at the excerpt, and then you wanted to talk about your direction of actors and your use of color
If you wish. What I'm saying is that the story of being a rebel is not only for women. And when I started to make the film, I thought I would follow a guy on the road and having meet a girl and then follow the girl. I thought it would be both. And then I was so impressed that more and more young women were on the road, which 20 years before was only for men. So in the emancipation of women, they also go to places and behavior that they didn't go before. I don't know if it's a progress in life, but they are on the road.
It's certainly the mark of our times.
Yes. So let's see how the poor Mona ends up totally frozen. And I have to say, it's a village where they have a specific folkloric, whatever it is. Since the Middle Age, they have that thing once a year. And
it's a ritual, it's kind of pagan ritual. Yeah.
And she doesn't know. She's going in for bread and she gets caught in something frightening, which puts her to be totally frozen and puts her to her final day.
Le clip, please.
Well, what it shows is that sometimes when you just go around and wander, you don't know what and what. And this is interesting to arrive in this village that day. It's frightening. Have you seen these monsters, It's a game, These monsters are supposed to catch the little people wearing white. It's a very old tradition. But not knowing it, it's so frightening. so disgusting. They try to catch her. Then she escapes, she loses her cape, and then she goes back to where she was, you know, like that.
The greenhouse.
The green, yeah, where she was. And she falls. But it shows enough that the girl now cannot catch her life. You know, as long as she says no, she's rebel. At some point, she's hungry, she's cold. Then comes this, she's overwhelmed, is that a word? Or, you know, by things she doesn't understand even. And when you lose the understanding and lose connection to things, I mean, plus she has lost her sleeping bag, which was her nest, her protection against the cold. God bless. Against the cold. When she loses the sleeping bag and she loses the blanket, and this is it, she has to die frozen. And the film was very dramatic. I must say the young Sandrine Bonner, can you believe that girl was not even 18? We did her 18th birthday on the shooting. And she acts so strongly, so dramatically, you know. Well, since she has been making career, I guess you have seen her in other films. She's still very good. And she was young. She had started with Maurice Pialat in a film called À nos amours when she was 15. I noticed her there. Very beautiful film in which she was, you know, very difficult, like a difficult adolescent. And she was a lot naked, including in another film that she did after. So when I asked her to visit me, she came with her father because she was a minor. And I said, look, for a change, you will be not only dressed, but trying to get more dress on yourself, trying to cover from the cold. You will try to go, including sleeping bag, so it's not that sexy. But in that film, you will have to be a real actress, because if you succeed that film, you will be good forever, you know. And her father said, well, for a change, yes, sure, good. And she came into the film, decided to be good, and she was good, but it was tough. You have seen just that scene. Can you imagine what she went through? All that dirt, all that wet, dark thing of wine on her face. And she has been very courageous all the way through, because the whole crew was courageous. You know, we didn't have much money, because I never find easily money for my films, even after 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, same story. So we had little money, and so we didn't have these, comment on appelle ça les, ils ont tous des roulottes, des...
Trailers.
Yeah.
You didn't have any trailers.
Nothing to keep us from the cold, and the crew and Sandrine, we were in the cold, not very, very cold, but almost, you know, near zero all the time, under 0.1 or 2 above. And you can see, well, you haven't seen the scene, but, you know, the cold coming out of her mouth. I mean, we didn't have trick for that. It was real. And she was courageous, I must say. But I have a special way to work with her. I didn't give her psychological clues. I didn't even decide from where she was coming. Like why she was on the road could have been one of the issues, or what led her. Qu'est-ce qui l'a conduite à?
What led her?
Led her to be on the road. I was interested in now, what she does now. And so I work on behavior with Sandrine. I told her, let's rehearse like what kind of shoes you have, how you will behave with your shoes. Can you light up a fire? Can you cook potatoes on a fire? Can you eat oil sardina in a can with your hands? I even sent her in the woods with another woman I had found, one of the, you know, vagabond women. And I say, well, if you want to understand what it is, go with her 2 days and sleep outside in a tent or something. And she went 2 days in the woods with the woman, as young as she was. And what came out of it, she discovered she was bored. You know, because the freedom, big word, freedom, okay, and so what? She had nothing to do. She was free and bored. I mean, it's interesting, you know, because then you discover other level of, you know, the dream of being on the road again and all that. Mm-hmm. And she also discovered that the other woman, was bright, you know, was young and bright, but she wanted nothing. She was like just there. So I told Sandrine, like I tell most of my actors, you know, learn your gesture, learn your behavior. Decide, how you should touch your head or not. Be nervous or be quiet or walk that way. And I wanted her, to give an example, to feel what you feel when you are alone, the noise of your own feet. And the noise is not the same if you're on a road, comment on dit bitume?
On a concrete road.
Concrete road, or if you are in a chemin, in a
mud path.
Mud or another with
dirt path.
Yeah, but the graviers, like
gravel.
Little stone thing.
Gravel path.
Gravel thing. Or if you go in a field which is like this, I can't remember what it is, that your feet had to go above and under, and in the woods with dry leaves and all that. I say, you have to be very attentive to your noise you do yourself. Well, the sound matter was good also to take it, but I wanted her to understand the noise that she hears, that we hear when we are alone walking. Sand can be different, etc. So I always talk about these very, I would say, physical things that go with acting. I think she learned that and she understood it very well. And by the way, she got a César with this film, which is our French Oscar as the best actress, and she was happy, and the film won something in Venice Festival. And we didn't expect that to happen, because when we did the film with little money and refused by many producers and distributors before making the film, if you tell the story, what is the story in 3 lines, in 2 lines, in 1 line? It's a woman, rebel, young, beautiful, but totally dirty, dies from... Yes, but that's what it is. Because the subject is also being dirty and smelling, dies from the cold, dies in a ditch. When you tell that to a distributor, you say, well, it's true that it's not so appealing. And I made it a film that many people saw, not only in France, but in the whole world. So appealing, the kind of appealing storytelling that the pitch that you bring to a distributor, producer, this is not exactly my thing, And by bringing these strange stories, same story for the Gleaners, nobody wanted to do, I say, well, people eating on the ground, picking and eating in garbages. Can we make a film about that? They say, well, so we didn't find money, same story, And at the end, these films are not only, they reach people, but they are not so sad in a way. Even if she dies, there is an energy in that woman, a survival energy. And whatever her fight for being free and alone is wrong or good, it's not my problem, but the way she fights to survive as much as she can until she gets caught by the cold and loneliness. I find her like a survivor. I admire that character, even though I thought she was not nice. When the film opened, we had little, is that flyers the word? That some people put on the white shield of the cars. Comment ça s'appelle?
Yeah, flyer, yeah.
But on mettait sous les
essuie-glaces. Yeah, and under the wipers.
Yes, and it would say, she stinks, she wouldn't say thank you, would you take her in your car? And another one was one of these things, because she's always on the road, trying to get into, well, to go nowhere. She wants to drive. This is very interesting. So anyway, the film intrigued people, and many people came, and he went around the world. So sometimes I feel I'm right to go my way and try to keep the ideas I have, not to be against something or to be original or something. But these stories, they get to me very strongly. I never make many films. I didn't make many films. And I don't start thinking, what should I do now? What's next? Let's read a book. Let's adapt something. It's not my thing. I wait. I wait until something touches me, intrigues me, or gets to me so strongly that I cannot avoid to prepare a film and find the money to make it. So, my obstination, is that?
Yeah, my stubbornness. Yeah.
Stubbornness, maybe. To be just doing my thing led me to be a side director in a way, But the audience I meet makes me feel good. So,
And yes, there were two more points that I think we wanted to talk about concerning Vagabond. One, and I think it's kind of linked to Cleo, and it's also kind of connected to the next film, is the link between documentary and fiction and how you use people you find in real location. And it's particularly important in Vagabond because she meets many people. Some of them are actors, some of them are not.
most of them are not. But you see, the except here is she's alone. She's fighting, trying to escape from these wild, crazy people who love the feast that they do one day a year. But this is true that she meets a vineyard
A man who works in the vineyard, an immigrant worker.
Yes, and he's a Tunisian and he's a real one, and she meets big, masons on the road and a man who keeps a garage. And besides Masha Merrill and Stéphane Fraisse, all the people acting in that fiction film, it's a real fiction, were real people, what I call real people. I gave them the lines, I helped them to learn the lines. But I think that somebody who's in his own shop with his own costume knows it's his own tools. He will act more nicely, more strongly than an actor to whom you ask to learn to use the tools. And especially when it could help the story to be believable. It's not that I want to make it realistic, but I want people to believe what's happening to the story, to the character, Mona. This is true that I'm trying to flirt always when I do a fiction with documentary, when I do a documentary with fiction. This is a real example that Vagabond is a real fiction film, but most of the people acting in it are non-actors. When The Gleaners and I is a documentary, but the characters, the real people I've met are so strong, they become characters in a way. So the documentary looks like a fiction and the fiction looks a little like a documentary. Well, it's a way of saying that I work in both approaches on life. Imagination, thinking, but also touching reality, which is so intriguing, so interesting. And real people are so beautiful, their faces, the way they behave, their words. Sometimes I steal their words, work on it, write something, bring it back to them or to another one. I'm working with reality not to make it look real only, but to use the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, when we were talking about this earlier, you used the word hybrid. And this permanent swing to and fro between documentary and fiction is also something that I would connect to the sense of freedom we talked about earlier. But I want to add something because I want to bring the second point, the last point we wanted to discuss about in Vagabond, is that it's also something which is extremely composed. And this is why it's connected to cinécriture. And in particular, in Vagabond, I know that you wanted to say something about your use of color in the film.
Yes.
And how it's a faux documentary because you've completely controlled the colors.
This is true. I also control the structure of the story. Not only it is the portrait. Well, I'd like to know, I don't see anybody, but has somebody seen Vagabond here in this room? Oh yes, many of them. So it's not too abstract when we speak about the film. Was my point, my concern. But you see, the structure of the film is made that the impossible portrait of Mona is made by people who have seen her pass. So we have these testimonies of this one, this one, this one. But also, she meets people. But the whole film is constructed or structured with 13 tracking shots going from the right to the left. Like she walks like this. And when I stop the tracking shot, there is something ending. And after she meets other people, like 5 or 6 minutes after, there is another tracking shot, starting with something resembling the one we have seen the time before. So I believe in persistence rétinienne. What do you call that?
Retinal persistence? Yeah.
Well, it's something that your eye remembers in a way. It's like listening to a sound and 10 minutes after there is still something of that sound. So I try to work with things that you see in a film, then they go away, and then it's still somewhere you kept that image. So I'm working on that and trying to prepare the audience to be driven even without knowing it by the structure of the film. And when you say that it's not a documentary at all, for sure, even if I use real people, we were shooting in the winter, late winter, February, March, even April. To tell the truth, spring was commencing, you know. And on some shots we had to throw things, you know, cut whatever looked like spring just to keep the winter. Because, you know, filmmakers are very, you know, very cruel toward nature. They want that, you know. And I also want a film which is shot in color to be very poor in color, very, very much dark colors of winter. And this is true. If there is anything red in the field, I would send an assistant to get rid of the red thing or to hide it somehow. There is one shot in which there is a, comment on dit chaperon rouge? Red.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah, there is a little girl who is really looking like that, crossing the village. But most of the time, what I wanted is to keep it out of color. I've done that also in another documentary, no, in another fiction called An Emotion Picture, which I'm showing here, when is it? Presenting it on Thursday. And in documentaire also. In Los Angeles, I succeeded to have no one drop of sun and no colors. See? But that's, you have to fight for that because it's a choice and you have to keep your choice. Again, we come to cine writing. You have to keep the choice to make a solid understanding of the audience. This is not to be tyrannical, selfish. I want the audience to understand, and to understand you have to make it clear. So colors has been a big concern for me. I started observing in colors some shows that was, comment dit des commandes?
Commissioned.
Commissioned about the tourism. I did one of the Côte d'Azur, one of the Chateaux
La
de la
Riviera,
Loire. Yeah. But on that level, I try to be just honest. But then I start to think, should I make a film, a feature film in color? And the first one feature I did was Le Bonheur, in which I really tried to work on the colors. I worked on, comment on dit des palettes?
Gamut.
Yeah. It's like deciding that one scene should have, you know, blue, yellow, green, and a little purple. Or deciding that all sequence.
Color scales, yeah.
Yeah. And like they go to a picnic and it's all red, the little children, the fire, the pepperoni, everything is red. I mean, it looks like this very phony when I speak about it, but in the film it flows kind of naturally. I love to work on colors.
So the film that, because here we're afraid of nothing, so we're jumping, you know, from one film to the next. And the film to which we are jumping now was made in 1964, and it's called Le Bonheur, Happiness. And it's a film that actually triggered very opposite kinds of reaction. On the one hand, people were really offended by it, some people, because it's a film that is very joyously, sensuously, but simply amoral. This is a man who is in love with two women, and he's perfectly happy with that. And
You're too right. He's in love with his wife
And
and
then
has
he
two
meets-
kids
and then he
he's
meets
very
an-
happy and loves nature and then
he meets another woman, and he's in love with her, and he still loves his wife, and this is happiness. And then maybe we shouldn't tell the whole
question
story.
again, has somebody seen Happiness here?
Okay.
Yes,
No, but,
some.
Yeah, but let me
What?
finish about
Yeah,
my introduction about the film, and then we can
Sure,
backtrack.
sure.
Yeah, if you
Sure,
don't
madame,
mind.
sure.
This was part of a reaction to the film, because people were somehow offended by the light-hearted tone taken to describe this total amorality. It was not a scandalous film. It was a very simple, happy film that was immoral. That was very bothering to some people. On the other hand, it also triggered great enthusiasm because of a treatment of color and light. In particular, one of the main inspirations of the film, and now that you've heard Agnès talk, you know that she's constantly or very often referring to paintings. And the reference was, of course, impressionistic paintings, and in particular, paintings showing picnic on the grass, and the
playing the light, the dialectic of shade and light and leaves and grass, and there are several scenes that are taking place outdoors. And again, you know, a very, very delicate and beautiful choice of color, color scale, complementary colors, and so forth and so on. And they were actually, this movie is so beautiful. It makes you think of a Renoir, you know, Monet, and so forth. But it's so beautiful that for me, it was very hard to pick up a sequence. And we talked about this, and we came to a mutual decision, which, however, is somehow quite paradoxical for a film called Happiness, because in this film about happiness, which starts with happiness and ends with happiness, this is the one moment of drama. A young husband going to picnic with his 2 children, wakes up after having made love.
Yeah, but they made love after.
After he had told her that there is another woman in his life, meaning another apple tree outside the orchard. This is really what he says. And they make love, and he wakes up, and his wife is gone. And when they finally find her...
Well, let's give a little suspense to the
Well,
scene.
but then how am I going to talk about why this sequence is beautiful?
After, and let you speak.
Then you
after.
let me speak.
Yes,
okay.
Good.
So then we won't tell you what happens, but I'll get the floor again. Okay. So
This is true. I don't know why we picked that. If I think about it.
You picked it.
Yeah, I know. Because I was in a mood of getting into the drama, but because it's like a piece of fruit, beautiful piece of fruit, and there is a worm inside. So the piece you see is the worm.
It's a very beautiful piece.
Yes, but you see, we could see a piece of the fruit, and we see just the worm.
Okay. Anyhow, the clip, s'il vous plaît.
C'est vrai que je regrette un peu, but that's okay.
Too late.
Heidi.
Okay, I'll just say a few words because I mean, Agnès now says maybe we shouldn't have picked up. I have my share of a guilt because when Agnès suggested this sequence, I said, yes, I had spotted it. It's so beautiful. It's a moment which is entirely constructed on editing. The repetition and the decomposition of the same movement, which uses purely cinematic means to express a very powerful emotion, but by putting it on another level. It is not only a man picking up the body of his dead wife who has just drowned. The story of his love, the story of a relationship is there, but it's something that only cinema has been able to do. And actually, this is a reference that Agnès wasn't too sure if she shared it with me, but for me it makes me feel of classical musical comedy of the time of Minelli, where you have this smoothness, repetition, decomposition of movement, also to express romantic attraction, romantic longing, romantic feelings. And this is something that only cinema was able to bring. Now, I give you the floor, my dear.
No, well, the reference to the American musical comedy doesn't really struck my mind, but
it could have been
what I
unconscious.
had the feeling was that cinema, as you said, can express something that we feel sometimes, is that we cannot accept something, and it's like you have to repeat yourself. It's like in his mind, he cannot imagine that his wife is dead. And not only he has to figure out that maybe it was by accident that she falls in the water, and we can see that she's trying to escape. She's trying to catch a branch or something to save herself. We don't know if it's true or it is in his mind. And that was a question always audiences ask. Did she commit suicide or not? And I say, as the author, I don't know. I couldn't decide. I don't exactly know if she did it or she slipped. And sometimes you slip because you are ready to do it, and sometimes it's a real accident. I couldn't figure out what and what, but what I know is that the man couldn't take to that situation, and by picking her many times, it's like he cannot do it. He cannot accept that he has to do it. And that's what cinema allows us to do, because it's physical. It's like physically showing something that he feels. Obviously, he didn't do it, you know. It's like when you allow yourself not to be realistic in a very realistic story. And I did that. It is true that it shocked my mind that faded the Uncle Yanko that is received today, totally pink. But when I kissed my uncle, when he asked about, are you the daughter of Eugène, are you the daughter of Eugène, in Greek, in English, in French, it's like in a joyful way, repeating that I could not believe that I found an uncle so beautiful that I never heard of. It was like a dream of an uncle, you know, a dream of a kind of fake father, you know, beautiful. And I suddenly realized today, because it's showing that many times we kiss and he asks, that it can be emotionally joyful or dramatic. It's the same thing. At some point, you cannot catch reality. You have to ask yourself, you know, if it really happened, or in joy and pain. It is true that by choosing that piece of the film, it brings a lot of drama to this evening. When the film is joyful and shows what that family really had is loving life, loving nature, loving picnics, loving their kids, and being, it's ridiculous to say because happiness is such a difficult word to use, but these people were happy. And when she's dead and he tries again the same thing with another blonde woman, she's the same. And she does the same thing. She waters the flowers, she feeds the kids, she kisses the man, she cooks, she goes to the school, and he works. And some people understand that life is just day to day, after day, day after day, you know, a way of living. Nobody believes in happiness, but we need to think that it exists, even there is a lot of rotten things inside it.
But you were also talking about happiness as a simple, cruel tale. And that
Well,
you've
cruelty,
done
yeah.
some of these in addition to happiness. You've done another movie that also created a little bit of scandal, and it was Kung Fu Master.
Oh yes, at the time, Kung Fu Master it's called in English, I mean, in America, I see a cassette, they call it Le Petit Amour.
Little Love.
Yeah, but Le Petit Amour means in French with, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
Distributors.
but you see, anyway, Kung Fu Master was a confusing title because it's not a karate movie. It's the story of a woman almost 40 years old, falling in love with a boy who is not even 15, 14 years old. And he's in love with a video game called Kung Fu Master, where he has to fight so that the little karate comes, you know, first floor, second floor, because at the last floor, he should deliver Sylvia. And it's very difficult, you know. The whole crew had the game. You all tried. Nobody succeeded. Only the young boy, the real one, Mathieu, did it. But you see, the story was like, can love exist between a woman and a almost young man, but still a child? And that has nothing to do with, comment on dit pédophilie ici?
Pedophilia.
Pedophilia. It has nothing to do, because this is love. And some stories happen like this. They are love. And it's adolescence coming back, you know, for the woman. And for him, it's a kind of first love. But nothing happens. It's just that it's very strong. And the film was shocking for some people, you know, because they couldn't accept that. When we see all the time, by the way, men of 40 years old
Falling in love with 16 years
girls,
old.
yeah, sure, that's normal. In the show business, that's the best. And they make them star at 17, you know. But when it's a woman and she approaches a young boy like this, there is a real smell of scandal. But I like that story. Jane Birkin was so perfect in it. So, I mean, like looking back to herself as an adolescent, and not like a mature woman trying to pervert a child. Has nothing to do with this, you know. In some times in our lives, we go back to some period, and it's like helping us to say that Jacques Demy, that I loved very much, was very ill in 1989. And he started to think about his childhood a lot. He loved his childhood. He had good memories of it. Even living very poorly in a garage where not only the father was working and the mother was, pumping the gas, and they had their place there in the middle of the garage, 2 rooms. And for some reason, I guess it has to do with when you are about to die, I would say. Something important comes back to you. And he started to write about his childhood. And he would type pages every day. And, every 2 hours a day would bring them to me to read. And at dinner we would discuss that. And after 50 pages of his writing, and the title was A Happy Childhood, I said, well, that would be a wonderful film. And he said, why don't you do it? I said, would you allow me to do it? I said, oh, yes, sure. He allowed me to do it. So I ended up in a very strange experience, which was writing a screenplay, because he had written facts, but no dialogue, no psychology, no feelings. Writing a screenplay about his childhood and writing dialogue that he had maybe with his father, mother, and brother. And we decided I should not show him the script, because I felt like, should I ask him permission, say, should we say that? And say, well, I said, or you write it or you don't. And he said, no, I don't want to write it. I don't want to direct it. I cannot. So I wrote the dialogue, I wrote the screenplay, and we went on the shooting. And we were so happy, I have to say, that in the city of Nantes, we finally got the real garage where he had been raised. It was still a garage, very modern, with electric things, and we had to undo. But the real place, can you believe, even the real rooms where he had been living, the little wall that he was seeing through the windows, the same thing was there. So we did the film there. And Jacques Demy would come on the shooting. And that was my best, comment on dit récompense?
My best
Récompense?
reward.
Reward that, he would come on the shooting, being very ill, sit on my director armchair, and look at the scene. And this is related to the scene we see. He would see the real garage where he was raised, a fake mother, but looking like his mother, a father that I picked looking like his father, a little boy being his brother, and himself acting like 8 years old as Jaco, as he was called. And he would sit, and I would say, well, look at what they say, listen, how is it? I mean, am I very wrong? Am I wrong? He said, no, I'm there. He always said that. This is exactly like it was. So was he nice to me, or was it really what they said 50 years before, And the experience was, I guess, something very strange. Was going in another person's memory without knowing. And I did that. I mean, I don't know how I did. But it seems that it is really childhood.
I think we're probably going to slightly change what we said we are going to do. I'm only going to give a few facts about Jaco. Then we'll look at Jaco. Then you can talk about some aspects of directing, and then I'll talk about maybe a little more. In Jaco de Nantes, you have 4 Jaco. 3 little boys, or 2 little boys, 1 young adolescent at different ages, and then the real Jacques Demy, who is present sometimes through some parts of his body, his eye, his hand, his sweater, his smile. The sequence that you're going to see is a sequence that Agnès has selected, and it starts just after the credit. At the beginning, though, before the credit, you've seen a beach, and then you've seen Jacques Demy lying with a big, kind smile on the beach. Then you see the credit. They are pretty long. They are pretty long because the movie is also going to include a number of popular French songs and excerpts from the movies of Jacques Demy, with whom Agnès was married for 32 years. So she knew his work very well. And then there is a young boy watching a puppet show in color. And the movie alternates black and white and color. The sequences with the real Jacques Demy are in color.
a lot of the fictional reconstruction sequences are in black and white, except for moments when the little boy is looking at spectacles, puppets, an ant coming back from Rio, and other spectacles of the sort. And so you have the credits, rather long. You have a red curtain falling down. And then you have the sequence you're going to see, which is composed mostly of a one-shot sequence in the garage, which is quite wonderful. And then throughout the film, there is a very interesting device. There is the painted sign of a hand before and after the different excerpts of Jacques Demy's films. Now, there is something I have to say, so that you really understand what you're going to see. At some moment, the fictional little Jacques is listening to his father talking to a customer and explaining what is done to the car and what the car is doing when the engine is still cold. And then we have the hand, and we cut to an excerpt from Les Parapluies de Cherbourg, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, one of Jacques Demy's most famous musicals with Catherine Deneuve. And there is the young lover of the heroine who is working in a garage and is saying exactly the same words to a customer. And fortunately, for reasons that Agnès cannot fathom, those subtitles are missing. So you don't really get the point that those are exactly the same words, but sung, because it's a singing film. And then there is the hand announcing the end of the excerpt. So you're going to see it now, and then Agnès can talk more about it. The clip, please.
Yes, because I thought it was interesting to look in that childhood of Jacques Demy. Which could be the key scenes, would you say that, of his childhood that become important scenes in his films? I guess that I thought, and I still believe, that his inspiration, most of his inspiration, the best of his inspiration, came from that childhood, from the family where he was living, the neighbors, the stories, the people around them, the class struggle, which was between workers and people having shops. And if you see the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, it's, the mother of the umbrella shop doesn't want her daughter to go with a worker. And in Chambranville, they have always that class gap. But it was interesting to organize in a way, to do the fiction scene that I thought were key scenes and have the exact piece of an excerpt of film matching with it. We didn't have subtitles because they say the same thing, le moteur cliquait un peu à froid. And I know that he heard his father discuss in the garage. So I was interested in showing that tracking shot, quite difficult to do, the tracking shot plus crane plus, and to have in a way, the whole setting of that family. We have the boy, Jaco and his boyfriends doing all what they do at that age. But the garage with, they had, a worker working in the garage. Comment on dit boîte un peu? Boiter. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
anyway,
I can find
the father being the garagiste. And with the béret, very French béret, always talking to the kids, have you done your homework? They always do that. The mother, working on the gas, serving the gas, pumping the gas. But in the same time, she's hairdresser, in a little piece of the garage. And we have that woman singing in the theater, because then you'll see them going to Comédie Musicale, which was called opérette at the time in the theater that Jacques Demy loved so much. And the little boy brother. And Jaco, who was already in love with his neighbor girlfriend, who was doing dance. And she became, in a way, the Lola of Lola that you maybe know. And I thought by exposing in one shot, more or less, and then there are 2 or 3 shots, the story, the whole story is there. Father, mother, brother, garage, and the girlfriend, neighbor. And that in that life, simple, happy childhood, what happened there was totally a source of inspiration. So in the same film, Jaco, I could tell a story of a boy in 1939 to 49, let's say, the years of the war and after the war. This is shot in black and white because that's the way the films were at the time. Then do that little research about what were the key scenes of Jacques Demy films and with excerpts of his different films. And also there is a third part in the film which is Jacques Demy being still alive when I did the film. I say still alive because we knew he was not in good shape. And he's in the film appearing as a real person, still there with his body and his flesh and his smile. And the film was difficult to finish because, by the way, Jacques saw it almost finished, but passed away before the editing was finished. And this is a strange story because I had to finish the film just when he was just dead. And I had to finish. I knew I had to do it. So I thought at that time it was a cinematic way of mourning, if I could say so. And I found out that cinema and making films and being cinematically involved has been always my life. Even though I had a real life, you know, I met people, I had kids, and I still going on, and I have 3 grandchildren. I mean, real life is there, and I eat, and I go in and out. But my life is really trying to find a cinematic writing or way to express what I can do with what I see. It's not only be a witness of what I see. This is not enough. Find a shape, to find a shape to express something that I wish to share. That's what I've been doing. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I made a film celebrating cinema and the love for cinema and the craziness of cinema called 101 Nights. It was a flop, like a huge flop. I mean, it's incredible. In New York, it was 1 or 2 weeks in Cinema Village, out. Nobody else saw it. In France, it did 3 weeks and out. And that was a film with Michel Piccoli and every Como actors like Depardieu and Belmondo and Delon and Jeanne Moreau, they were all there, you know, and Gina Lollobrigida and, you know, Mastroianni being the friend of. I thought it was agreeable and funny to discuss about flop. So I didn't reach audiences, you know, I didn't reach acknowledgement of the story. And it happens, you have to know that you don't send when you fish, you know, you don't send the thing at the right place. Or sometimes it's the right time.
You bait at the wrong place, yeah.
And sometimes it's the right time. Mm-hmm. I think that if Cleo was so well understood, because there was that syndrome of fearing cancer in the 60s, and that woman, in a way, expressing that fear physically, got into the people. I think that Vagabond came at the right time, before people start to speak about the homeless people. That had become a big subject after 87. Now we call them SDF in France, and there is a lot happening for them and around them and trying to help them and get them out of the trouble. And maybe the Gleaners also came in a moment that nobody spoke about the waste, when we speak a lot about other things. And sometimes I wonder, you know, if Cleo would open 10 years after, now, what would happen? So we go with society as it is. I feel things happening. I try to discover facts of society that are not so much talked about. Then I make the mind. I try to see what they do to me, what they touch me, and then I meet people. And then what I do before shooting is very important, you know, going around, being open, being ready. And I tell you, my first assistant is luck. And I need to have, you know, things happening that I don't expect. And it happens very often that I say, oh my God, it just happened at the right time.
But I think you also have a way to make luck work for you. And there is one thing we haven't discussed, and that I would like to bring at the forefront. It's your incredible humor. And you were afraid that some of the excerpts chosen were a little heavy. And I want to say two things at that level. I have in front of me, you all have that. It's a picture from one of your films called Ulysses. And it's a goat eating the picture of a goat. I think that summarizes a lot of Agnes's humor. There are things that I have to confess are a little difficult to translate. And this is part of this incredible freedom and composition that I was talking about. Agnes's free association in filmmaking is not only how she very skillfully knows how to weave a cinematic texture by assembling images, editing, but also how she knows how to play with words, and how she knows how to play with the combination of words and images. And she always does this with an incredible amount of grace and humor, and it's always witty. Now, this wit, to me, in the light of some of the so-called heavier excerpts that we have seen today, this wit to me reflects the essence of cinema. Cinema is not a sad art. Cinema, and nobody else better than Agnès understood it, cinema is a life-asserting force. We look at the image of people. Some of them are dead. Some of them have aged. They're not as beautiful as they used to be. Some of them have left us. And here they are fighting, living, breathing, surviving for us, for this medium called cinema. But in order to capture that moment of grace, you need a great filmmaker. You need somebody who knows how to put into her film the very precious aspect of the present time. Many filmmakers always film the moment before and the moment after, but not the moment during. The scene in which Jean-Claude Dureau picks up his dead wife, you'd say it's a sad scene, but the incredible sensuality and love with whom she shows him picking up his wife again and again and again, this is the essence of the present. And the present can never be stolen from us once it's restored to us by the magic of cinema. The same thing, Jacques Demy is no longer with us. He lives through his movies, but he also lives through the gaze of Agnès, who has given us this exquisite jewel. And it's not a sad movie. We know he's dead. The same way we know at the beginning of Vagabond that Sandrine Bonnaire, the character played by Sandrine Bonnaire, is dead, but we see her. That doesn't stop us from admiring her gumption and resistance, her will, her stubbornness, her wickedness sometimes. And we really admire her for that. We see Cleo fighting. Am I going to die? Am I going to live? And we love her for it. We share these moments, the pigeon flying, the moment she goes down the steps, the moment she's looking at a fountain in a public park and meet a soldier. So, to me, it's an incredible gift to be a spectator of Agnes's films. And Agnès, you're giving this to us, and none of your movies are sad, even when they deal with serious subjects.
You know, recently there was, when the Gleaners and I came to France, a lot of people wrote about it, and I was very happy about what they wrote. And one made a very simple sentence en Montpellier. I say it in French. Il a dit, un film grave et de bonne humeur.
A serious but good-natured movie.
No, but it's like, even if it's serious, I mean, I deal with serious issues, social issues, and sad issues like people who have no other opportunity than eating what is on the ground, what is in the garbage. This is a heavy subject and a very serious issue. But I must say, I have that, what is it? I love life, and I love filming. So I cannot make a film which only is heavy and sad, because the joy of filming, going through France, meeting people, the surprises of filming, the luck that comes to me sometimes, and including when we did Saint-Ouen-Illois, Vagabond, which was a strong story. But, you know, the pleasure of filming, being with a crew, inventing shots, having the people love to do it with me, the editing, which is so exciting, trying to find a shape, and then meeting the audience, make me feel that it's a joy to be a filmmaker. Even if it's so difficult, I don't find the money. I don't know how I didn't lose my energy and my optimism, but I didn't lose them, because when you come to the point that you film and you finish a film, there is a satisfaction. Not that I'm proud or nothing. The satisfaction of using that tool, that artistic tool, which is cinema, which I think is the art of this century. And this is not painting, this is not installation, this is not literature. I think the main art of this century is film. And it is including special effects, strange films, you know, huge production, and discrete films and different films.
Movies, yeah.
I mean, all kind of movies, but this is the expression of our society. That's what I believe. So I express a little part of that society, but by being myself in good mood most of the time. And when I'm not, I succeed to go back to the good mood, because I think it's more agreeable to do that. And I feel so lucky, so privileged to do that job instead of, you know, being in a factory or selling tickets or bus or something. That could have happened in my life or to other lives. I think we are so privileged to be artists, you know. Even though it's tough, it's difficult, it's, you know, it takes ages sometimes to raise the money. And at some point, I still believe that being an artist is a privilege. And then if audiences share what I offer, when there is a sharing, because excerpt is difficult, you know. But when you see a full film and then you feel that the audience has well reacted and they love the film, they don't forget it. You know, I feel in a way that I'm sort of lucky.
I would like to do two things now. First of all, I would like to ask the audience to clap for Agnès.
To do what? Oh my God. So come on, stop it.
She wants her to stop. She's the boss here. But secondly, I should ask actually the real boss here. Do we have time for Q&A with the audience, or do we have to vacate? Okay. So the problem is, though, I'm supposed to be moderating. I can't see a thing.
Can you turn these lights?
Yeah, so maybe, okay. And so, okay, this
right.
is the way we're going to do it. You're going to ask your question. You have to give me time to repeat it because we're recording that. And then, of course, time for Agnès to answer. So, you.
You say that you like to use color in your films, and I'm wondering about the sequence at the very beginning of Cleo, where the tarot cards are in color, but the rest is not. Why you chose to do that?
This is a question about the use of color at the beginning of Cleo from 5 to 7, while the rest of the movie is in black and white. And the question started, you said that you like to use color.
Well, I always saw Cleo in black and white, even though at the time we could already use color. But I thought that when she goes to the storyteller, you said?
Tarot, fortune teller.
Fortune teller. That woman with her cards, I mean, this is like a phony life. We don't know if it's true or not. It's imagination or gift of that woman. We don't know. And I wanted to separate a kind of fate, which is in the cards, in the tarot cards, from real story. So when the woman speaks, she's in black and white, you know, but the cards are in color. Cards are already an illustration of life. This is not life. So I thought it would be interesting to keep them in color, while the woman even speaks to her husband and say, she's low, she's low, she will die. That makes us feel that there is the reality of cards, whatever it is, what the woman believes, and the fear that comes to Cleo right away when she sees the frightening face of that woman. Well, look, you know, she says, Hans, I don't know too well. I mean, we understand that that woman feels that she's about to die and doesn't want to tell her, and it makes her even more frightened. I thought it was okay to keep to decide to have the tarot cards in color. It's another level of fake or real reality. But I must say, we have not restored the colors of this, and I should do it. Because they are slightly faded, they should be very colorful.
It was done for the DVD, just so you know.
But is it colorful in the DVD?
Yes.
Good. I haven't seen it. I received it in Paris, but I didn't have the time to see it.
Yes? No more questions? Yes. Oh, yeah. I can see you. Who? Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's maybe not so much a question as an observation that, like, both in this film, Happiness, and the sort of portrayal or the writing that you did in creating the character of the husband, I think of it along with that, I guess he was the lover, the film that you made with the two women who were friends throughout life, and I don't recall the name.
One thing the other
One
doesn't?
sings and the other doesn't.
Yeah.
In that film too, when the man who's the photographer, like,
Hangs himself.
hangs himself. I mean, it's such a sort of a great portrayal of what he's about and how it's so perfect to the scenario that they're in, as far as it's so insufficient or even it's the worst thing he could have done. You know what I mean? I mean, for the relationship in some way. You know, I mean, he doesn't make any money for one thing, and then he takes away the little bit of support that he gives her in being her partner.
It's a commentary on the way the character of a husband in Happiness was written, and comparing this to the way the character of a photographer who is the lover of one of the two women who are friends for life in one thing doesn't, the other doesn't, who first doesn't make much money, is very cold and aloof, and eventually hangs himself, which is the worst thing he could have done for the relationship. But it's just a comment, right?
Well,
yeah.
it's a comment, and you know, it's kind of portrait of an artist. Some of these artists not succeeding to do what they like to do, and as you can see, when he portrays women, he always tries to push them to look like unwed mother, poor girls. I mean, like leftover women. And you know, I was inspired by two things, by Modigliani, who always painted, you know, how his wife or other like totally lost women. Or let's say Ingrid Bergman, who projected his anxiety on women. Most of his beautiful films, women characters being so anxious, so attacked by, you know, despair. I think he was projecting his own thing. And I believe that some artists project on women what they cannot achieve themselves as models or as whatever. And that photographer who doesn't succeed in life and not making money and sees that he cannot go further, I thought it was interesting, even though you suffered that, to have him hang himself. I mean, like deciding not to go further, which puts the woman in a total, not only despair, but she's, you know, she has to be a victim. She's a victim, and the story is over 10 years how she de-victimizes herself from that difficult start, when the other one is already a rebel. So, well, maybe it helps the screenplay, as you said, but I thought it was a kind of despair start for her, for Thérèse. Well, some men and some women
there
quit,
is
you
a
know.
question there. Yeah, you?
I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about why you began Vagabond, telling the audience that Mona is dead, so you take away that element of suspense, whereas in a movie like Cleo, we wait until the very end to get the results of her cancer test. So what the difference is and how it would have changed Vagabond if you had saved that, you know, her death until the end, why you chose that.
The question is, why did you choose to start Vagabond by showing the death of Mona, while thus eliminating all suspense, while in Cleo we have to wait until the end of the movie to learn about the result of a medical test?
In the case of Vagabond, Mona, if I had not started like this, we could always believe that somebody will help her, she can get out of it, she may find somebody nice, she may decide to work, she accepts things. And since she's a no person, she's dead for me. I think that refusing dialogue, refusing to share anything is dying. So it's not so much about freedom, because sometimes people say, so Vagabond, are you explaining freedom is impossible, that if somebody looks for freedom, he gets death as a result of that search. I say, no, because it's not really about freedom, even though she says all the time, I want to be free. But you know, between freedom and loneliness, and freedom and the idea that if one refuses any dialogue, any conversation, any real understanding of others, this is a way to die. So I thought, since she was a no person, she could be dead already. And then I didn't want any kind of suspense, as you say, or expecting something. I wanted to see she's dead, what happened in the 2 last months of her life. How come she, from being a kind of wild girl on the road and getting to be clean by washing herself in the ocean, in the Mediterranean, which is the beginning, you know, she comes like a Venus, you know, Aphrodite, out of the water, far away, not to be seen, but we know she's clean and fresh and out of the water, how she becomes more and more dirty. Even the last scene that you have seen is the ultimate way of being dirty, because it's their joy to throw her disgusting pieces of fabric. I thought it was more interesting, you know, it's my choice. It could be discussed, but it's my choice. No, I'm saying, you ask, I say, I decided it that way. I didn't want any suspense, and I thought it was just showing coolly, in a way, it's kind of cool, that how it happened that she became so much near the end, near the death.
Yes?
Yes?
Do I see?
Yes, right here.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious hearing you talk about Cleo, and I mean, it seems like you really set it up to challenge yourself in the exact timing and the exact steps and how that was all put together. And your use of mirrors in that film, the cafes and the hat shop, and it just seems like, to me, in viewing it, that you're challenging yourself to keep the camera out and to stage the blocking so that you are seeing as much of the mirrors as possible and as much of the reflections as possible. I'm just curious about how you set up those shots or chose those shots. They're so masterfully done.
But this is a question about the challenges that Agnès set for herself in Cleo. One of the challenges being shooting, trying to reproduce the real time and the exact number of steps that Cleo would have to take. Another one would be the omnipresent use of mirrors. In the film, mirrors, for these shots, they had to be blocked so that you wouldn't see the camera. And of course, these shots are masterful, but how did you do it?
As I said, when I said that the excerpt was just at the middle of the film, in the first part, I needed to have a lot of mirrors, as I said, because she's looked at, she looks herself in mirrors. So I needed, including in the cafe, I used one of these mirrors with 2 pieces so that her face is kind of broken, like in some early modern paintings. But you see, the thing about mirrors is that, again, I was lucky. When she went into that shop to buy a hat, obviously she had to try the hats, so we needed mirrors. We were sometimes outside the shop, sometimes inside, being careful, as you know, to not get the camera in the mirrors, which is difficult, but one has to be careful. Now, what happened that day? Here comes the Garde Républicaine, guards on horses. You see them very rarely in Paris. I see them once every 3 years, I meet them. Here we are in the shop, shooting the shots of her with the hats. And I could see, because I hear the noise of these horses coming, I said, we have to catch them. So we catch them in the mirrors, in the reflection. We went fast like fast, because they passed. We didn't ask them to do it twice. We didn't, there were like, 50 of these
soldiers on horses.
Yeah. So we got them in the mirrors and in the windows, in the reflection. And that's, I say again, that was luck. And it was interesting to have that, because it's very pompous in a way, when she's trying these very, exaggerated hats. Hats are related for me with real coquetry, real coquette, what can I say?
So, some of his hats are pretty ugly.
Huh?
Some of his hats are pretty ugly.
They have 61 also.
Yeah.
You know. Because the film doesn't show so much period, but it is still a 61. Like the Gare Montparnasse is like it was at the time, and the way people are and behave is really dated. Not so much. I remember asking the woman who did the costume to do something kind of classical black with, you know, something opening here, so that it wouldn't be too much exactly 60. Because even Corinne Marchand was not the fashion type of 61. She was much more a woman of the turn of the century, you know, very beautifully built, when the fashion at the time was twiggy, you know, like little women like this, with nothing behind and nothing in front. And she was different. So I tried at the time already to make it kind of timeless film. But the thing about mirrors, you just have to be careful and smart when you shoot. And obviously, if we missed, I didn't keep the shot, you know, because when, you know, suddenly the camera, we were turning, we were, well, Jean Rabier was also very good cameraman. But the thing about the horses I love a lot, because I didn't expect that to happen. So we just got it.
Yes, I think I see there's a question in the back, yeah? Oh, you were moving your hand. Oh, that didn't mean anything.
Maybe you
okay.
want to say goodbye?
There is somebody there? I really can't see anything. This is terrible, those lights. Yeah.
Because they put the lights.
I hate to dwell on Cleo, but I took a cinema class for the first time a year ago and enjoyed it very much. And when I came to my final paper, we were supposed to kind of take a look and kind of compare or contrast some of the films that we had seen. And I picked Vivre sa vie of Godard along with Cleo. And one of the things about was I was contrasting the independence of women and how Godard was portraying his women versus how you were portraying your women. And obviously I felt that Cleo was gaining her independence throughout the movie, especially at the key turn that you showed in the clip tonight. But my curiosity is why at the very end do you have a male character go with her? I understand the role that the soldier could play in kind of giving her that sharing of grief or the sharing of fear, but what drew you to actually bring him with her to the doctor? Why not have her being independent go on to the doctor alone?
The question is about,
Well,
in a college paper, this young lady decided to compare the representation of women in Godard's My Life to Live and Cleo, and to see how Godard was representing women versus the way Agnès Varda was representing women, and that, I suppose in contradistinction, Cleo was gaining more and more independence as the movie progressed, especially after the key moment shown in the excerpt you've seen today. But the question is, why was there a need to have a male character accompany Cleo to the doctor to get the results of a medical test rather than her being independent and going there by herself?
I'm surprised by your question, because I don't see Cleo as gaining independency so much. I see her as getting from being a kind of doll that everybody looks at, as to opening herself to others. This is not so much independency than just discovering that other people exist, that are interesting, that they teach us something. And when she goes in the cafe and nobody listens to her record, she's no longer the doll singer. She's just in a cafe where people don't listen to a song. And when she goes further and she sees the people in the street doing strange things to make money, and she sees her girlfriend, she opens herself to listen to the girlfriend, to discover that the nudity of the model doesn't make, you know, a problem for her, that other people look through the model to reach an ID. So she's discovering things. I don't think she's so much independent, even though obviously by changing she gets rid a little of other people. But you see, I think it's very important that she meets that soldier. Not only because he's a man and she needs another relationship than the one very phony with her lover, you know, making, you know, I made it very long shots, very sophisticated, so is the lover. And she meets a real young man was also afraid of dying at the war. And I think that two fears meet, even though as a man and a woman they meet, but in a level of real opening, listening to his stories, listening to her stories. I find it very important. And I think it's very normal that he wants to be with her. And he goes to the doctor with her. Who wants to go alone to learn something difficult, you know? This is not independence. This is like heroic behavior. We don't believe in hero, you know. I don't. And she's very happy to have that man coming with her. And I love the idea because in hospital, you know, you have to be family to know something. So he said, are you the family? He said, I'm the brother. And I like the idea that he's not a brother. He doesn't behave like a brother, but he says he's a brother so that the doctor will say that she needs chemotherapy and X-ray, whatever. And we understand he may write to the doctor later. He becomes so involved in her life, and the way she said she would take him to the train when they sit in the, you know, in the garden. And I like the idea that when they are together, space and time go like wide shot and close up and wide shot and close, because time that has been challenging to understand how tough it is, like it goes 1 minute after 1 minute. When they are in the garden, time has suddenly expanded. They don't feel the time. They know that he has to go to the station. She has to go home alone. But there is kind of expanding of the time and expanding of their own feelings that she said, il me semble, I have the feeling that I'm happy. I'm the feeling I'm not afraid. So it's maybe just that moment of grace. And I needed that to be a man and a woman. For me, it was the peace. In the world, this is the peace. If a man and a woman can share a moment of grace, this is more important than independence.
But I would add something. I think by letting him go with her to the doctor, she's also doing something for him. He's not only helping her, she's helping him. Sometimes we give a gift to people by allowing them a space in our lives, by letting them help us. And she said, it would have been another day I would have never spoken to you.
Sure.
She's opening herself up and she's becoming more generous. And this is, as you said, it's a moment of grace.
So, you know, I listen to you, I try to answer as properly as possible, but in a way I don't understand the question. I don't see how you have felt that. But, you know, when a film is done, it belongs to the people who see the film. So I never complain about a reaction. I mean, I say my own impression, but I'm not the one to decide what you feel. I mean, you feel that, it's fine. It's fine. It's just saying, because we are in a Q&A, I give my own version of it. But I think it's interesting to believe that everybody does something with a film. And according to who you are, what you feel, what is your surrounding, your, you know, everything, your age, your race. I mean, you don't take film the same way. And that's interesting to have different reactions.
I think maybe we can take one more question.
The last one?
Okay, again, I'm sorry, I don't see you.
No. I was a photographer in my early years with the TNP, Jean Villard, Gérard Philippe, a beautiful group of theater. Sometimes I think I would like to go back to it, since I've been offered to do a big exhibition of my has-been photography, you know, as a has-been photographer. I thought I should do a new little, comment on dit, un petit coup de photographie. But I don't know.
Get back at it again.
Yeah, I think filming is, even though I don't film a lot, when I think of some filmmakers who have done, you know, every year they do a new film. But what I feel is that filming gives me so much satisfaction, so much interest. Even though I don't succeed, I fight in the time of shooting. I try to reach themes, sometimes I don't. Light is going away, I'm frustrated because I didn't get what I wanted. All this goes with the pleasure. And so I don't touch photography again anymore.
Yeah, maybe we can.
Yes?
One more.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Just one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
What do you think the importance of the community was during the New Wave? Do you think that
It was about the historical role of a community of people that compose the new wave.
But you see, new wave is a name which has been given to that cinema by François Giroud, who was a journalist. And when the so-called new wave was already on, 2 or 3 years after. So there had never been a group like Dada started Surrealism, you know, it was a really group sharing ideas of the Cubist or Surrealist, you know, was it school. There is not such a thing like a general or common ideas of movies, but yes, there was a group at Cahiers du Cinéma, including Rivette, Godard, Romer, Chabrol, Truffaut, yes. And that group was writing critics of films, discussing ideas, and they certainly had a common, even they were very different, a common idea that they should change the cinema, you know, throw the other out and be the best one. But there were different people. And like Alain René was working on another side, I was totally alone. I mean, alone regarding to the group. And Jacques Demy, when I met him, he was friendly with them, but he was not writing, he was not part of the theoretical discussion. And there were different people. So when, you know, well, I made like La Pointe Côte 54, and then in 59 started all the 400 coups, 400 blows, and Abu Souf, Breathless, and then suddenly it was like an explosion of new directors, because since the first one made money, you know, everybody thought, young filmmakers, this is it. That's how you make cheap film and make a lot of money. So in the terms of the producers, it was a good deal to have young directors. And in these years, in those years, 100 young directors appeared, like it is now, again in France. In the last 2 years, we have like 100 new directors because one of two new films, so-called new films, have made money. So the new wave, so-called new wave, in a way, just a period of time, let's call it the 60s in France. Mm-hmm. From 59 to 69, there was a real explosion of young directors being very different. And they never had, maybe they had meetings at the Cahiers du Cinéma about criticizing films, but there was never such a thing like meetings or discussions. Sometimes in Cannes Festival, the Cahiers du Cinéma would do a party of Cahiers du Cinéma friends, and we were all together. But it was like a one-day thing, you know. I think I went once or twice to the Cahiers du Cinéma and said hello, and I didn't discuss ever with, yeah, as friends, you know, Rivette and Godard and Demy and me, we were friends, so we would discuss, but mostly play other things, you know, play cards and say stupid things and paint and go on the beach. And I remember Godard renting a house near Nice, and Jacques and me, we went, and Anna Karina that was there too. And I remember things like, which appear later in films. Godard was on a blown mattress on the pool, you know, when
inflatable mattress.
With his hat, lying and reading a book. I could see like Piccoli later in
Contempt.
The Contempt. And I could see Anna, I remember Anna, you know, always bored, getting out of the bed, looking at the beautiful sky. When Jacques and me, we were totally happy, enjoying the place, enjoying the room, enjoying everything, stupidly maybe. And these two were so different. And Anna would say, what can I do? What can I do? I don't know what to do.
Well,
and it came out.
It's a line in Pierrot le Fou, of course.
Yes.
Qu'est-ce que je peux faire?
You know, qu'est-ce que je peux faire? Je sais pas quoi faire. And I remember Jacques and me thinking at the time, this is before it became a line, because the line is superb. But in real life, I remember Jacques and me saying, how come she has nothing to do? How come she doesn't find something nice to do? We have a beautiful house. We had board painting. We had board games. You know, we could swim. We could go. We could enjoy things, and we were enjoying them. And I remember Godard saying one day to us, I don't know how you behave, you guys. You don't like drama. You don't like to fight. You don't like to... I would be bored. I mean, I said, well, you are what you are. So you see, sometimes real life comes and becomes something else. That's what cinema does. I mean, using reality to become myths in a way, you know, because in real life, I found Anna was kind of bizarre, but when I heard that in Pierrot Le Fou, it's in Pierrot Le Fou, yes.
Yeah, Pierrot Le Fou, yeah.
And I thought, oh, what a wonderful line. How beautiful are these people lost in the world in an island, you know. So to say that Nouvelle Vague is something which is a name for cinema historically in that time, but besides some friendships here and there was never something like a group. Yeah, Richard Rowd said that there was the left bank, because our heart is more on the left side of politics than the others. So it's René, Marquet, and me. They call us the left bank, because we lived on the left bank of the Seine River. When Cahiers du Cinéma and the other filmmakers were living on the right bank of the Seine River, whatever you think about that allegory together. But we didn't even discuss cinema so much. Going to movies and loving films and discussing, but not really discussing what we had to do ourselves. I think, you know, I would say being an artist is a very lonely story, and whatever you have a nice life, that adventure is something related with loneliness and deep thinking and enjoying it all at the same time. It's something very ambiguous, you know. The pain and the joy, they go together.
Sis?
Thank you for your attention.